More on that from Charles later on. Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke testifies in front of a House panel later this morning. Yesterday it was on the Senate side. The highlight was an exchange between Ben Bernanke and Senator Elizabeth Warren. Ms. Warren does not like the banks, and she asked the Fed chairman if the big banks were still too big to fail. Here's some of the exchange.
The benefits of being large are going to be small, are going to decline over time, which means that some banks are going to voluntarily begin to reduce their size because they're not getting the benefit that they used to get.
I read you on this. I read your predictions on this in your earlier testimony, but so far it looks like they're getting $83 billion for staying big.
Well, that's one study, Senator. You don't know whether that's an accurate number.
Well, okay, we'll go back and look at it again if you think there's a problem with it. But does it worry you?
Of course. I think this is very important. And I think we need to, and we're putting a lot of effort into this.
Guess who's here to talk about the big banks? Yeah, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Elizabeth Warren says they're still too big. They're too big to fail. I say we should have broken them up. It would have been much easier than trying to regulate them with Dodd-Frank. What do you say?
Right, too big to fail is government speak for too big for us to allow them to fail. Nothing is too big to fail. And that the government will borrow money or take tax dollars to shore those banks up. So we start at that as a baseline. This is a great question because there is a division in the free market camp. And the division is break them up because they got that big on the backs of the taxpayers, and we should not be exposed to the risk that they have borne, nor should we shore them up.
Right.
The other side of the argument is let the free market take care of this. Just get rid of the Federal Reserve and its involvement with them. But the government has no more right to say to Jamie Dimon, you have to split into 5 banks, than it could say to Stuart Varney, you have to sell off your real estate assets because we think you own too much. So there is that split in the free market camp. But the one thing that free market people, and you and I are in the same camp, though I'm probably a little bit more libertarian than you on this, believe is that the taxpayers should not be at risk. So something needs to be done. Is it done by the force of government, one camp, or is it done by removing the Federal Reserve from the equation? That would be the forces of the free market, the other camp. Well, but I thought she asked a great question. And you know, I've not been a fan of hers, and I used some negative comments about her when she was running for the office she now holds. But she's an intelligent woman. She asked great questions yesterday, and I thought he didn't want to answer those questions. He gave her a very rude and snarky answer. How do you know about the $83 billion? That $83 billion has been well established. In fact, that's probably on the low end of the estimate.
Strangely enough, I am in Senator Warren's camp on the issue of too big to fail.
Would you use the power of the government to break the banks?
Yes.
In other words, legislation that required, or a rule from the Treasury Department that required Chase to become 5 different banks.
I would go that way. You say the alternative is to get rid of the Federal Reserve and get rid of the government.
At least get it out of the equation.
Okay, well,
and stop shoring up these banks.
That's not likely to happen.
Correct.
Because it's highly unlikely to happen. I go the other way and say break them up and remove the taxpayer. Take the taxpayer off the hook for mistakes which these smaller banks will make.
We are traveling down the same path but at different speeds.
Yeah, we are.
Unlike Warren and Bernanke, who are traveling down the same path, but not always going in the same direction.
No, actually, I think Senator Warren is probably more aligned with you and I.
Yes,
he runs the Fed, for heaven's sake.
Yes, interestingly, she is more aligned with you and me. He does run the Fed, and he needs to be sensitive to that, because she should be a champion of the Fed, but instead she's a critic of it.
But the bottom line is that this argument is going nowhere, absolutely nowhere. We have chosen the route of Dodd-Frank to regulate the banks, let them get big, and keep the taxpayer on the hook. That's where we've gone.
The president is wedded to that, and the majority of Democrats in the House and even many Republicans are wedded to it. And so we can have these conversations and illuminate your great audience as to these problems, but I don't think any of us is going to see any relief as long as Barack Obama's in the White House.
Yeah, I think we've come full circle in rather pleasant fashion.
What the heck else can we agree on?
I don't know.
It's raining out.
It's getting dangerous. Judge, thank you very much.